What if I told you that the most nutritious foods were quickly banned from American stores for the past 70 years? Not because they were dangerous, but because they threatened a trillion-dollar industry built on keeping people dependent. What happened to real food will surprise you. In 1950, your grandfather could walk into any corner store and buy fresh milk from local dairies, cheese aged in traditional ways, and meat from animals that actually lived on farms. Today, those same foods are nearly impossible to find. The transformation of American food didn't happen overnight. It was a calculated shift that began right after World War II. New regulations began restricting small producers who had fed American families for generations. Raw milk dairies faced mounting regulatory pressure. Home butter makers found themselves subject to commercial licensing requirements. Small-scale meat processors discovered that new inspection standards favored large facilities over local operations. The rules weren't necessarily wrong, but they made it nearly impossible for small producers to compete. Food giants like Kraft, General Mills, and Procter & Gamble stepped into this regulatory vacuum with modern alternatives that promised convenience and consistency. Massive advertising campaigns convinced Americans that margarine was healthier than butter, that canned fruit was just as good as fresh, that pasteurization made milk safer, but it also made small dairies disappear. Within a single generation, foods that had sustained American families for centuries were replaced by industrial substitutes that prioritized profit margins over nutrition. Raw milk, the traditional dairy they replaced. Before widespread pasteurization, American families enjoyed fresh milk from local dairies that contained natural enzymes, beneficial bacteria, and complete proteins in their original form. Raw milk naturally contains over 60 enzymes that aid digestion, along with probiotics that support immune function. Your great-grandmother never questioned the quality of her milk because it came from cows she could see grazing in nearby pastures. The shift to pasteurization allowed for centralized production and longer shelf life, making it possible to ship milk across great distances. While this solved distribution challenges, it also changed the fundamental nature of milk itself. Pasteurization destroys many of the natural enzymes and beneficial bacteria that raw milk contains. Today, raw milk for human consumption is heavily regulated in most states, with many prohibiting its commercial sale entirely. The milk that sustained American families for centuries became a specialty product available only through specific channels, while pasteurized milk became the standard that most Americans have never questioned. Heritage breed meats, the genetics we lost. Before industrial agriculture, American farms raised diverse breeds of cattle, pigs, and chickens that had been developed over centuries for specific traits like hardiness, flavor, and nutritional content. Breeds like Gloucestershire Old Spot pigs and Randall Lineback cattle were perfectly adapted to thrive on pasture and produce meat with superior nutritional profiles, including higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids and other beneficial compounds. The shift to industrial production favored breeds that could grow quickly in confined spaces and produce consistent results at scale. This efficiency came at a cost: genetic diversity. Many heritage breeds couldn't compete economically with industrial operations and gradually disappeared from American farms. Since 1950, we've lost over 190 heritage livestock breeds, along with the unique genetic traits they carried. Today, the vast majority of American meat comes from just a handful of breeds optimized for industrial production rather than nutrition or flavor. The genetic diversity that sustained American agriculture for centuries has been replaced by uniformity, designed for efficiency. Artisan cheese, the craft they standardized. Traditional American cheese making once produced incredible varieties of cheese using time-honored techniques passed down through generations. These artisan cheeses developed complex flavors through natural aging processes and beneficial bacteria cultures that also provided digestive benefits. Each region had its own cheese-making traditions, creating unique products that reflected local conditions and expertise. The industrialization of cheese production prioritized consistency, shelf life, and mass production over traditional methods. Regulations requiring pasteurization for certain cheese types effectively ended many traditional cheese-making practices. While these regulations addressed legitimate safety concerns in large-scale production, they also made it difficult for small-scale artisan producers to continue traditional methods. Today, most American cheese is produced in large facilities using standardized processes, while traditional cheese-making knowledge has become increasingly rare. The complex flavors and beneficial properties of traditionally made cheese have been largely replaced by consistent, shelf-stable products designed for mass distribution. Organ meats, the nutrition we forgot. Your great-grandfather understood that organ meats, liver, heart, and kidneys, were among the most nutrient-dense foods available. These foods contain concentrated levels of vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients that are difficult to find in such high concentrations elsewhere. Liver, for example, contains more vitamin A, B vitamins, and iron per serving than almost any other food. The shift in American eating habits moved away from organ meats as muscle meat became more popular and widely available. Marketing campaigns promoted steaks and chicken breasts as premium products, while organ meats were increasingly seen as old-fashioned or undesirable. This cultural shift meant that some of the most nutritious parts of the animal were relegated to pet food or industrial uses rather than human consumption. Today, most Americans have never tasted organ meats and miss out on their exceptional nutritional benefits. The foods that previous generations considered essential for optimal health have become curiosities that most people avoid. Fermented foods, the living cultures we replaced. Before refrigeration became widespread, American households relied on fermentation to preserve food and create nutritious, flavorful products. Every family knew how to make sauerkraut, pickles, and fermented dairy products that were rich in beneficial bacteria. These living foods supported digestive health and provided nutrients that fresh foods couldn't offer during winter months. The development of industrial food processing replaced many traditional fermented foods with shelf-stable alternatives that could be mass-produced and distributed nationally. Real sauerkraut, made through natural fermentation, was largely replaced with vinegar-pickled cabbage that lacks the beneficial bacteria of true fermentation. Traditional pickles gave way to products made with preservatives and artificial flavors that could maintain a consistent appearance and taste. The knowledge of home fermentation passed down through generations was lost as families became accustomed to purchasing these products rather than making them. Today, Americans spend billions on probiotic supplements while having limited access to the traditional fermented foods that naturally provided these benefits. Wild game, the free-range protein, we regulated away. For most of American history, wild game provided a significant portion of the protein in many families' diets. Venison, wild turkey, duck, and other game animals offered lean, nutrient-dense meat that was naturally free-range and contained higher levels of beneficial nutrients compared to domesticated alternatives. These animals lived natural lives and ate diverse wild diets that contributed to their superior nutritional profiles. Conservation laws, while important for wildlife management, also made commercial sale of wild game largely prohibited. Today, wild game can generally only be obtained through hunting or specialized game farms, making it inaccessible to most consumers. This means that One of the most sustainable and nutritious protein sources available in North America has been effectively removed from the commercial marketplace. Most Americans now rely entirely on domesticated meat sources, missing out on the unique nutritional benefits that wild game provides. Traditional fats, the cooking medium, we abandoned. Before the mid-20th century, Americans cooked with traditional fats that had been used for centuries: lard from pastured pigs, tallow from grass-fed cattle, and butter from grass-fed cows. These fats were prized for their stability at high temperatures, their flavor, and their role in creating satisfying, nutritious meals. Traditional fats also provided essential fatty acids and fat-soluble vitamins that supported overall health. The development of vegetable oil processing technology introduced new cooking fats extracted from seeds and grains. Marketing campaigns promoted these industrial oils as modern alternatives to traditional fats, emphasizing their lighter appearance and longer shelf life. Government dietary guidelines began recommending these newer oils while discouraging traditional fats. This shift fundamentally changed how Americans cooked and what they consumed. Today, most cooking is done with highly processed seed oils, while the traditional fats that sustained previous generations have become specialty products that many people actively avoid. Heirloom varieties, the genetic diversity. We lost. Your grandfather's garden contained vegetable varieties that had been selected and saved by farmers for generations. These heirloom varieties were adapted to local growing conditions and were chosen for flavor, nutrition, and storage qualities rather than shipping or uniform appearance. Tomatoes like Cherokee Purple and Brandywine offered complex flavors that modern varieties can't match, while corn varieties like Glass Gem provided both beauty and nutrition. The development of hybrid varieties and industrial agriculture shifted focus toward vegetables that could be mechanically harvested, shipped long distances, and maintain consistent appearance. This efficiency came at the cost of genetic diversity and often flavor and nutrition. Many heirloom varieties were discontinued as seed companies focused on varieties suitable for commercial production. Today, we've lost over 90% of the vegetable varieties that were available in 1900. The vegetables that sustained American families for generations now exist primarily in the collections of dedicated seed savers and specialty growers. Seasonal eating, the natural rhythm we lost. Your ancestors ate according to the seasons by necessity, consuming fresh foods when they were naturally available and preserved foods during winter months. This pattern provided different nutrients throughout the year and created natural variety in the diet. Spring brought fresh greens that provided vitamins after winter's preserved foods. Summer offered abundant fresh fruits and vegetables at peak nutrition. Fall provided nuts, seeds, and root vegetables that could be stored. Winter meant relying on preserved, fermented, and stored foods. Modern food distribution systems made it possible to eat any food at any time of year through global shipping, controlled atmosphere storage, and greenhouse production. While this provided unprecedented food security and variety, it also disconnected people from natural seasonal rhythms and often meant consuming foods that were harvested before peak ripeness and shipped long distances. The natural cycle of eating that had sustained human health for millennia was replaced by constant availability that many nutritionists now believe may have unintended health consequences. Home food preservation, the skills we forgot. Every American household once possessed extensive knowledge about preserving food through canning, smoking, drying, and fermenting. These skills were considered essential for family survival and allowed people to eat well year-round using local, seasonal ingredients. Home-preserved foods often retained more nutrients than commercially processed alternatives and contained no artificial additives. The convenience of commercial food processing gradually replaced home preservation skills as people found it easier to purchase preserved foods rather than make them at home. While this saved time and effort, it also meant losing valuable knowledge and skills that had been passed down through generations. Today, most Americans lack the basic knowledge to preserve food for their families and are entirely dependent on commercial food systems. The independence and self-sufficiency that came from food preservation skills has been replaced by convenience and dependence on industrial food production. Raw honey, the sweetener they processed. Traditional honey, thick, sometimes crystallized and full of enzymes, pollen, and beneficial compounds, was once America's primary sweetener and natural medicine. Local beekeepers produced honey that reflected the unique flowers and plants of their region, creating distinct flavors and health benefits that varied by location and season. Raw honey contains over 180 different compounds, including enzymes that aid digestion and natural antioxidants. Commercial honey production introduced processing methods that created a more uniform product with longer shelf life and consistent appearance. Much commercial honey is heated and filtered to prevent crystallization and create the clear, liquid product that consumers expect. While this processing creates a more convenient product, it also removes much of the pollen and destroys many of the beneficial enzymes that raw honey contains. Today, most supermarket honey has been processed to the point where it bears little resemblance to the traditional honey that previous generations enjoyed, both in terms of flavor and nutritional content. Over the past 70 years, our food system has prioritized efficiency, shelf life, and convenience over the traditional foods that sustained American families for generations. While we've gained food security and convenience, we've also lost much of the flavor, nutrition, and food knowledge that our grandparents took for granted. Subscribe to learn more about traditional foods and growing methods, and check out the next video on your screen to discover heritage vegetables you can still grow in your own garden today.